host, sabrinasalvati.
Breaking news. Elon Musk has gone rogue.
In the last few hours with a handful of journalists being banned.
Well, as I'm sure everyone who's been doxxed would agree, showing real-time information about somebody's location is inappropriate, and I think everyone on this call would not like that to be done to them. And there is not going to be any distinction in the future between journalists, so-called journalists, and regular people. Everyone's going to be treated the same. You're not special because you're a journalist. You're a Twitter. You're a citizen. So no special treatment. You dox, you get suspended. End of story. So and ban evasion, or trying to be clever about it, like, oh, I posted a link to the real-time information, is obviously that is obviously simply trying to evade the meaning. There's no different than actually showing real-time information.
So when you're saying posting a link to it, I mean, some of the people like Drew and Ryan Mack from the New York Times who were banned were they were reporting on it in the course of sort of pretty normal journalistic endeavors. You consider that like a tricky attempt at ban evasion?
You show the link to the real-time information, ban evasion, obviously.
Drew, I don't think you were posting the real-time information, right?
I mean, you're suggesting that we're sharing your address, which is not true. And you're suggesting that we're posting. We never. I never posted your address.
You posted a link to the address.
We posted a link. In the course of reporting about Elon Jet, we posted links to Elon Jet, which are now not online and now banned on Twitter. And Twitter also, of course, marks even the Instagram and Mastodon accounts of Elon Jet as harmful. Using, we have to acknowledge using the same exact link blocking technique that you have criticized as part of the Hunter Biden New York Post story in 2020. So what is different here and there?
No more acceptable for me. It's no more acceptable for me, for you, than it is for me. Same thing. So anyway.
So it's unacceptable what you're doing?
No. What you dox, you get suspended. End of story. That's it.
Elon, I have to ask, I mean, I think what everyone's wondering is it's highly unusual for journalists at the Washington Post and the New York Times to have their Twitter accounts suspended. And it just so happens that it's, the boss in charge, so, what's the deal there? Oh, I think Elon has left. I guess
that's
we'll
unfortunate
never know
because
the answer.
Yeah, I mean,
guess what the difference is there.
Man,
not trying to.
So many. I was raring to go, guys.
I know, I was too.
I was going to order a Cybertruck.
I just want to say, sorry, I don't want to browbeat him. And this is reporting, right? There is value to reporting where people go. Most of what Elon Jet shared was him going to the factory in California or the factory in Texas.
Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Honey, breaking news, okay? This isn't even on my thumbnail. So I started off this way because I found out about this after I had already chosen my stories last night. And I said, I have to show this. So welcome to the show. Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So let's go ahead and start off with the thumbnail because I want to go ahead and get that out the way because this story is not on it. And then we'll give shout out to patrons and then we'll get back to this crazy Elon Musk story. Tonight, we will be discussing Chris Hedges and Richard Wolff inflation update. Interesting discussion there. I'm also going to discuss Charlie Baker crazy news, my outgoing governor there. I'm also going to discuss Joe Biden is pressured, but who is the pressure coming from? Maybe not who you would think. We're also going to discuss the UCLA strike update. There is huge news about that as well. But first and foremost, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. And we're going to kick it off with this Elon Musk story because I'm like, this is crazy. Okay? Because Elon has gone rogue. Elon is not a part of the team anymore. He's gone off and did his own thing. And some people are like, dude, has lost it. All right, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. I like saying it like that. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker as well. You guys keep the lights on. You're the reason that makes the world go round. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Let's give it up for Diana Ruiz. Thank you so much. Welcome. Welcome to the newbie in the house. So, like I told you, this show was live. Sometimes crazy things happen, and today is one of those days. So I saw this story about Elon Musk, and I said, I have to discuss this tonight. But I didn't have time to change the thumbnail. So it is what it is. Welcome. Let's go ahead and get into it. Now, you heard that recording there from a Twitter space that Elon Musk was participating in, and some of you may be wondering, well, what was this all about? If you have not heard, apparently last night, Elon Musk took it upon himself to start suspending multiple journalists on Twitter. And I don't mean like independent journalists. I'm talking about journalists that work for the Washington Post, the New York Times, the New York Post. These are journalists that work for mainstream media outlets. Elon said, you gotta go. Now, why would he have done that? First, let's go ahead and tap into this New York Times article, which also brought up this story as well. Twitter suspends accounts of half a dozen journalists. Elon said, you can't stay home. Well, you can stay home. Elon said, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. The social media service, which is owned by Elon Musk, said that it suspends accounts that violate the Twitter rules, but did not provide the details. Here are some of the journalist accounts that were suspended. You may know some of these peeps. So we have at A Trooper, at RMac18, at Donnie. Those are just a few. There's many of them. The accounts suspended include Ryan Mack of the New York Times, Drew Harwell of the Washington Post, Aaron Rupert, an independent journalist. I think he might be the only one that was independent from what I saw. Donnie O'Sullivan of CNN. Elon is out here. Let me tell you something, okay? Elon, when I say he went rogue, he seriously went rogue. Elon is out here removing people from CNN. Elon's like, I don't give a fuck. He said, you gotta go. Just like that. Matt Bender of Mashable, Tony Webster, an independent journalist. So there's one more. Mackay Lee of The Intercept, and political journalist Keith Olbermann. Now, again, more have been suspended since then, just FYI. It was unclear what the suspensions had in common. Each user's Twitter page included a message that said it suspended accounts that violate the Twitter rules. The moves came a day after Twitter suspended more than 25 accounts that track the planes of government agencies, billionaires, and high-profile individuals, including that of Mr. Musk. Many of the accounts were operated by Jack Sweeney, a 20-year-old college student and flight tracking enthusiasts who had used Twitter to post updates about the location of Mr. Musk's private plane using publicly available information. Publicly available information. Let me sum this up for you. Do you remember that time? It was a couple nights ago. I told you that I was in a Twitter space and Elon Musk was one of the key speakers, actually the key speaker. And this was right after the first part of the Twitter files were released. So he was basically there to answer questions for people and tell people the future about Twitter. During that Twitter space, he said that he was on his jet. He was on a private jet, but he was still participating in the meeting. Somebody, somewhere, this gentleman who was mentioned in this article, decided to track his jet. Now, here's the problem. It was publicly available information. So it wasn't as if this individual went out of his way to try to put some type of tracking device on him or whatever. It was not like that. It was publicly available information. Apparently, that information was shared with other journalists who may have shared that information with other journalists and so on and so on. And that is why these journalists were suspended. Not even like you have a temporary suspension of 5 days. These mofos were banned. Oh, it's Friday. We're getting all into it tonight, okay? We are getting all into it. So let's go on. Last month, Mr. Musk had said he would allow the account that tracked his private plane to remain on Twitter, though he said it amounted to a security threat. My commitment to free speech extends even to not banning the account following my plane, even though that is a direct personal safety risk, he said in a tweet at the time. But like some people do, he changed his mind. He changed his mind this week after he claimed a car in which one of his sons was traveling was accosted by a crazy stalker. On Wednesday, Mr. Musk tweeted that any account that posted real-time location info of anyone will be suspended. Keep in mind, that was announced after his jet had already been tracked. So he posted that announcement, but the activity had already occurred. Going on, he goes on to say it's a physical safety violation. This includes posting links to sites with real-time location info. So, oh my God, this is what you need to see about his time since he's been at Twitter. Jet tracker accounts. Twitter suspended over 25 accounts that track the planes of government agencies, billionaires, and prominent people. And that includes him as well. Goes into talking about Twitter Blue and all that jazz, which you guys already know about, especially if you're on there. Some of the journalists whose accounts were suspended had written about the accounts that tracked the private planes, or they tweeted about those accounts. So let me make that very clear. Some of the journalist accounts that were suspended actually did not track the plane. They wrote about it, or they tweeted about it, or maybe they shared a link, but they weren't actually the ones that did it. Elon said, y'all hoes got to go too. I am not being as professional tonight. I'm sorry. It's Friday. We're going to let loose. We're going to have a little bit of fun tonight. Mr. Musk did not respond to a request for comment, and Twitter did not respond to an email for comment. In a tweet, Mr. Musk said Twitter's rules on doxing, which refers to the sharing of someone's personal documents, including information such as their address, apply to journalists as well as everyone else. He did not elaborate. Tonight's suspension of the Twitter accounts of a number of prominent journalists, including the New York Times' Ryan Mack, is questionable and unfortunate. That's coming from Charlie, a spokesman for the Times. Neither the Times nor Ryan have received any explanation about why this occurred. We hope that all of the journalist accounts are reinstated and that Twitter provides a satisfying explanation for this action. A representative from the Post did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Christine, a CNN spokeswoman, said the suspensions were concerning but not surprising, and that Twitter's increasing instability and volatility should be of incredible concern for everyone who uses it. In an appearance on CNN after his account was suspended, Mr. O'Sullivan said Twitter's actions could intimidate journalists who cover companies owned by Mr. Musk. So, Elon is just like, look, I don't give a fuck. He does not care. He does not care. And if you missed that first part, I'm just going to play the beginning of this portion because I want you to see who's in this Twitter space too. He gave his explanation. Obviously, he really did not want to continue to have this conversation as he pieced out. They said, oh, I think Elon just left. Listen to it again.
In the last few hours with a handful of journalists being banned.
Well, as I'm sure everyone who's been doxxed would agree, showing real-time information about somebody's location is inappropriate, and I think everyone on this call would not like that to be done to them. And there is not going to be any distinction in the future between journalists, so-called journalists, and regular people. Everyone's going to be treated the same. You're not special because you're a journalist. You're a Twitter. You're a citizen.
You are not special just because you are a journalist. I want you to pay attention to the accounts that are in this room. These are journalists here, right? Ben Judd, Ben S, Elon's Jet, Drew. I looked up all these accounts, so I know Bradley, with the exception of Dan Price. Dan Price is still around. Okay, long story. Dan got other issues to worry about, but Dan Price is there. Caroline's there. Philip's there. Jordan, Cody, Keffels, and Brandy, and I can't see the rest.
So no special treatment. You dox, you get suspended. End of story. So and ban evasion, or trying to be clever about it, like, oh, I posted a link to the real-time information, is obviously that is obviously simply trying to evade the meaning. There's no different than actually showing real-time information.
So when you're saying posting a link to it, I mean, some of the people like Drew and Ryan Mack from the New York Times who were banned were they were reporting on it in the course of sort of pretty normal journalistic endeavors. You consider that like a tricky attempt at ban evasion?
You show the link to the real-time information, ban evasion, obviously.
Drew, I don't think you were posting the real-time information, right?
I mean, you're suggesting that we're sharing your address, which is not true. And you're suggesting that we're posting. We never. I never posted your address.
You posted a link to the address.
We posted a link. In the course of reporting about Elon Jet, we posted links to Elon Jet, which are now not online and now banned on Twitter. And Twitter also, of course, marks even the Instagram and Mastodon accounts of Elon Jet as harmful. Using, we have to acknowledge, using the same exact link blocking technique that you have criticized as part of the Hunter Biden New York Post story in 2020. So what is different here and there?
No more acceptable for me. It's no more acceptable for me, for you, than it is for me. Same thing. So anyway.
So it's unacceptable what you're doing?
No. What you dox, you get suspended. End of story. That's it.
Elon, I have to ask, I mean, I think what everyone's wondering is it's highly unusual for journalists at the Washington Post and the New York Times to have their Twitter accounts suspended. And it just so happens that it's, the boss in charge, so, what's the deal there? Oh, I think Elon has left.
And just like that, Elon was gone. So it's really interesting to me because when he first took over Twitter, he was talking about like more like free speech. And that's what a lot of us thought, that he was going to be for free speech and an advocate for that. And as time has went by, we realized, nah, he's not really for free speech. He's for the kind of speech that he's okay with. If he decides tomorrow, yeah, I don't really like people talking about tacos, you're gone. Just like that, gone. Gone. As you can see, he left in the middle of the discussion. Left in the middle of the discussion. So that was from Twitter Space. Twitter Spaces can be recorded. Whoever hosted this one recorded it. So I don't know what else to say about that. What's this bling girl? Sabby, after he took out Spaces for a few hours. Really? Huh. Interesting. So he made it so that no one else could host a Twitter space. Do you guys see what's happening here? Do you see what's happening? He's just doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants to. If somebody pisses him off, he's just like, okay, you're gone. So much for free speech. So much for trying to be a champion of the people. But what's really interesting to me is that most of the people that were removed are people who work for mainstream media outlets. Well, short story, but I had to tell you about it. You needed to know what was going on there. So I wanted to make sure I shared that information with you, because right now, what's happening with Elon Musk, like, this is really scary. It's really scary, you guys. And I just don't know. I don't know. Like, Elon owns Twitter. He's keeping everybody else in check. But who is keeping Elon in check? Nobody. Nobody. Dude has gone rogue. That's right. Terry says too much power. Exactly. He has too much power. Can't take it. Can't take it. Okay, let me go to some of the comments and then we will get to the next story. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. Pretend journalist for mainstream propagandists. Ouch. Marvin, why did you do that? Mastermind says, you have a Tesla. Elon has your real-time location. But Mastermind, it's okay for him to do it, though. That's the thing. He doesn't want other people to do it. Corey says, I can't get over that he's wearing like armor in his profile picture. Yeah, I know. It's pretty cringe. It's pretty cringe. Okay. Let's go ahead into our next story. I do not know if everyone has been following this, but the University of California has decided to go on strike, an academic worker strike. I don't blame them. I worked in higher ed for over a decade. I totally understand where they're all coming from. So I'm really passionate about this subject, but there has been a recent update about this story as well. So, canceled lectures, no grades. The University of California students face chaotic finals as academic workers strike. 48,000 employees engaged in the work stoppage play a crucial role in the state's prestigious higher education system. Okay, let's go ahead and get into it. There are the strikers there. I also have a video I want to show you about this as well. Hundreds of thousands of undergraduate students at the University of California face a chaotic finish to their fall term as a strike by academic workers grinds through its fourth week. Finals were in full swing this week, even as some 48,000 employees represented by United Auto Workers Union remain on strike, including the tutors, the teaching assistants who led class discussions. Let me highlight this for a second. I'm going to tell you something about TAs who led class discussions, provide one-on-one mentorship and support, and help faculty grade coursework. Let's talk about TAs for a second. TAs are incredibly useful. Faculty rely on them. students rely on them. When I was in undergrad, and it's changed a little bit over the years, but when I was in undergrad, there were times that my TA actually taught the class. They were always there to grade the papers. But then there were times when our professor couldn't be there and the TA would actually teach the class. TAs, they're underpaid. They were underpaid back then. They're underpaid now. TAs are underpaid. They do a lot of work. They basically take away the brunt work from the professor and handle all that. So TAs are incredibly, incredibly important, regardless of what type of college you go to, whether it's a public college or whether it's a private university. TAs are very important. While many students and professors have joined the picket line in support of the workers striking for better pay and benefits, concern is growing about the disruption's impact on California's premier higher education system. For those who are not aware, even though the University of California is a public university system, it's not private school system, it's actually ranked pretty high. The University of California system includes UCLA, and that also includes the University of California, Berkeley, which is also a top tier school. So that's why their system is a little bit different when you compare it to some of the other states. But that public education system there in California is one of the top ones. Everything has been affected, says Jesus, a first-year student at UCLA. Our grades have been delayed. We don't know how grading is going to work. Oh, that's when you wish you had those TAs. And we've had to do more stuff on our own. It's definitely a weird situation. And here are some of the workers on strike there. The strike comes as rising inflation and severe housing shortage makes it difficult to moderate to low-income earners to pay for even basic necessities like food and rent. You have to remember, California is very expensive, you guys. The strikers join a long list of people employed by public agencies like teachers and police officers who cannot afford to live where they serve in high-priced cities like LA and the Bay Area. This is not uncommon. Similar situation here in Massachusetts. I like to make the comparison of Massachusetts education system to California's because we have some of the same situations here where we have like these elite higher ed institutions that don't really pay much to afford to live in the areas where we work. I worked at MIT. I worked at Boston University. I worked at Northeastern, which is my alma mater. I worked at Northeastern University. And it didn't matter which university I worked at in the Boston area. Most of them, they don't pay much. And that's what people have to understand. So people would tell me, oh my God, you work at MIT? Wow, you must be doing really well. I bet you they pay you a lot. No. Same thing when I worked at Boston University. Wow, you work at BU? I bet you're making a lot. Nah. What people don't seem to understand, if you're not in the higher education system, the people making all the money are the deans, faculty members, some upper level administration like associate dean of students. Some of these titles that they come up with that don't really mean anything. That's a whole nother story. I can get into that another time. But we don't make much. I was an academic advisor for years. We don't make much, even though that position requires you to have a master's degree. So you have to go to grad school to get that position, but you're not paid much. A lot of times we were salary. So when I work overtime, when I work extra hours, when I would answer emails when I was at home, when I wasn't supposed to be working, I'm not paid for that. That also is not uncommon. Welcome to the world of higher ed. That's on the administrative side. Then you have people that have other positions that are worse off than we were. The TAs, the graduate assistants, the PhD students who are given these mediocre stipends that is basically poverty level in Boston, giving a PhD student a stipend of like $32,000 a year that don't do shit for you here in Boston, Massachusetts. And they can't have a job on the side. So the PhD students, the TAs, the graduate assistants, these people are not paid much. They're paid very little. And it is a way for faculty, particularly those in the sciences, it is a way for faculty members to get cheap labor. It's been a problem for a long time. This is why you're seeing some of these universities, their graduate students are trying to form a union because they're not getting benefits that they should have. Cheap labor. They have these kids working in their research labs till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. The kids go home barely awake. They come back to school the next day barely awake, especially if you're at MIT, because the competition is so fierce. And these kids are living with like 5, 6 roommates. Someone has a mattress on the floor. Can't afford to buy groceries. They're eating top ramen. So we used to do like a lot of events for them to give them free food so they can eat real food. Imagine doing that 5 to 7 years. So I totally get all of this. I totally understand it. Now, here's the problem. A lot of these universities, like the University System of California, those universities actually bring in a lot of money. But where does the money go? Deans, presidents of those universities make a lot of money. The president of Boston University makes $2 million a year. The president of Harvard University, last time I checked, was making like over $700,000 a year. That's where the money goes. Or for frivolous things on campus. Let's get a gold elevator door. For what? Let's get a new fancy engineering hall. What's wrong with the one you got? I've seen universities just waste money over a decade. Over a decade, I watch money come in and just fly around in circles instead of going to the people that actually need it. Let's go back in. This week, 17 striking workers were arrested on trespassing charges during a protest outside of the University of California's administrative office in Sacramento and another 10 in LA. The union said in a statement, members have occupied school buildings, picketed outside chancellors' homes, and drawn the support of other unions, including the Teamsters, whose members refused to deliver packages last month to the UC campuses. You see, this is what you do. You got to join with other people, not just the people that work at the university, but people who also deliver packages to those universities. You got to get everybody on board, man. And they mentioned the chancellor's homes, and I think that's very important because you need to know these people are making a lot of money. Those people are. The president of the university, I told you, the one at BU, Professor Brown, he's making over $2 million a year. This is public information in Massachusetts. Every year, Boston.com publishes what these university presidents are making in Massachusetts. That's how I know who makes what. Have to be open about that. The president has a nice, fancy home. The university pays for it. The president doesn't pay mortgage. Why do they need to make $2 million a year? All that money going out the door. Leroy says collaborative strikes across industries. That's right. This is what you have to do. Since the strike began in mid-November, lecturers across the 10 campus system have been canceled and workloads reduced for UC's more than 230,000 undergraduate students. The content of some final exams has also been adjusted to exclude material that could not be covered because of the strike. Oh, hit them hard. Hit them hard. Some campuses, including UCLA, have pushed back deadlines for submitting grades because faculty members, what did I tell you, rely so heavily on teaching assistants to assess student performance. They don't realize just how much they need you until you're gone. Without these crucial academic workers who hold study sessions, tutor students, read term papers, and proctor and grade exams, nothing less than UC's reputation for excellence hangs in the balance. Now, I have a video here I want to show you so you can see what this looks like in action. So let's go ahead and get into that. Shout out to More Perfect Union because they actually posted this video. So let's go ahead and get into it, guys. This is what's happening. Get this message out. The colleges across the United States, they're bringing in a lot of money, but it's not going to the right people.
We're staging the biggest academic strike in U.S. history.
Because the University of California is paying its student workers poverty wages.
We make up 1/5 of the workforce, and we only take up 1% of the UC's budget.
We don't think a university should act like a corporation, and we're going to put a stop to it through workers' power.
We do, I don't know, somewhere between like 70 and 90% of the labor at the University of California. There's just no way that this university will operate, and we will continue to stay out on strike until we win.
That's right. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. This is the largest academic worker strike ever. So hopefully more people will become inspired by this.
The university fucks around, the university finds out.
This is really unprecedented that 4 bargaining units have come together to strike at the same time. So we're not just here at UCLA, we're all across UC at 10 different campuses.
We're 48,000 strong for the first time, and so we have an unprecedented opportunity to fight for really important demands that we normally wouldn't be able to. And there's so many shared conditions that we have in our work environment.
We're fighting for living wages for postdocs, visa fees waived for international postdocs, childcare subsidies for working parents, as well as transit subsidies.
We're fighting for capped class sizes because we really care about the students' learning conditions.
I just want to chime in really quick about postdocs for those wondering what that is. Typically, a postdoc is someone who has just completed their PhD. And so they'll apply for what is called a postdoc position. It's a little bit tricky because technically they're not staff, but they're also not students. They're kind of in that in-between phase. They are not paid much. You think they would be because they have a PhD. A lot of times students that get their PhD and they want to work in academia, they will start off as a postdoc and then hopefully transition into some type of assistant professorship, hopefully the tenure track, but that's getting harder and harder. It's more difficult to get on tenure track now. But that is the path that they are supposed to take. Did you know that some of these postdocs, when I was at MIT, did you know some of them were making $42,000 a year? Now, to some of you, depending on where you live, that might be a good amount. In Boston, $42,000 a year is nothing. So they go from paying them $32,000 a year stipend as a PhD student to $42,000 a year now that you have your PhD as a postdoc. Again, it is another way for the faculty and the university to get cheap labor.
One of the key things I'm fighting for are ending rent burden and earning a cost of living adjustment. I'm also fighting for, more sustainable public transportation.
As TAs, we want to raise the brightest generation of students, right? And we can't do that when we are looking, wondering how we're going to make next month's rent, choosing between feeding ourselves and skipping meals or.
See, this guy is a PhD candidate. Did you hear what he just said about how they're going to pay next month's rent, whether they're going to skip meals? I'm not exaggerating, you guys. I used to do events every week for the students so they could get free food because some of them wouldn't eat because they just didn't have the money. The stipend is not enough. It's not enough for you. So it's just very painful.
Some students even live out of their cars, some TAs. The average UC worker makes $23K on average. If you live on campus near UCLA, like the graduate student housing, it's like $1,400 to $1,700 a month for rent. So you're making about $1,800 a month, and then you're just paying that back to the university as your landlord. Increasing our wages would just transform the university into what it envisions itself to be. You think the University of California is a regressive system, but it's not.
How do I get by? Well, I don't have much of a social life, which is extremely infantilizing as a 34-year-old woman.
That's why we would always host events for them. What she just said, she doesn't have much of a social life. They can't afford to do it. There was something that he said here really quickly. I don't want to miss that part. Sorry.
What it envisions itself to be. You think the University of California is a regressive system, but it's not.
You think it's a progressive system, but it's not. Here's something I really want you to take home. If you don't remember anything I said tonight, some of these universities that appear to be progressive or very welcoming and open and all of that type of jazz, they are not a school. It is a business. These universities do not operate like schools anymore. They operate like a business. And when it comes to the business side of things, most of these schools are actually conservative. You have to understand, even here in Massachusetts, it's all about making money. They don't care that you have to skip meals. They don't care that you may not be able to pay your rent next month because they gave you a small stipend, or they won't give graduate assistants a raise or TA students a raise. They don't care about that. All they care about is how can we keep the most money for the university, and one of the most effective ways for them to do that is by having cheap labor. And if you don't want to do it, then they'll just try to get another student to take your spot. This is why this strike is so important.
How do I get by? Well, I don't have much of a social life, which is extremely infantilizing as a 34-year-old woman. Quite frankly, it's really hard to, be able to have friends my own age when I don't make enough to go out with people. I am a very proud cat mom, but, unfortunately not a mother. That's something I would like to be able to say at this age, but I've had to make the decision between, continuing to work at the UC and having a family.
The monthly cost of infant child care in Davis is...
Shout out to Crip Hop Nation. I'm a Black disabled graduate student in the UCLA on a picket line. All right, guys, let's give it up for Crip Hip Hop Nation or Crip Hop Nation. Thank you so much. That is good to hear. Those are the things we like to hear that.
Is roughly 70% of my entire pre-tax salary. For graduate students at UC Davis, there is a child care grant available. It works out to roughly $300 a month. Whereas the cost of our daycare is going to be $2,070 a month. So
people have to understand also, it's not uncommon for graduate students, particularly also PhD students, to have a family, to be married, to have kids. You got to think about the age group. A lot of them, they're like in their, later 20s. Some of them are in their early 30s. So it's not uncommon for them to have a family that they need to take care of as well. $300 grant for childcare is nothing.
Even with both of us being eligible for that grant because we're both grad students, it's a little over a quarter of the cost of childcare.
As of now, UC offers no subsidies for childcare, and what they've brought to the table in proposals for postdocs includes giving a whopping $2,500 a year, which is equivalent to about $200 a month for childcare subsidies, which would essentially not cover or even put a dent in the types of childcare that's available for postdocs at the moment.
What this $2,000 a month of childcare support would actually do is really help to equalize the ability of students from different programs to have children.
Because of the cost of childcare, a lot of women ultimately make the decision to leave science because their salary essentially covers just childcare. And so you do the trade-offs. It could be at home with my kid, taking care of them, versus working just to try to barely cover their childcare.
It feels very...
And that's one of the reasons, what she just said there, that's one of the reasons why you don't have as many women in science fields. That is one of the reasons why. Because the research comes first. They will tell you the research comes first. I worked in the science department, so I know. It's unfortunate.
Very urgent to be on strike right now. I have a very salient clock ticking.
I think if I could send one clear message to the university, is really that we are human beings first that are providing a really powerful tool for the rest of our community in order for us to fight diseases, in order for us to learn new things about how the world works, in order for individuals to just live better lives in general. And I think that we should be compensated fairly for that. We should be treated equitable. We should not have to work in hostile working environments.
We have a real chance to transform the university system of California into a public university once again.
And beyond the University of California, we are on the front lines of a transformation within academia across the country.
I want to remind everyone too, at one point it was free to attend college in California. Public college. At one point it was free. But shout out to those guys. Shout out to them. You know, maybe others will follow. Maybe people that work at MIT and Boston University, particularly Boston University, because those mofos are cringe. Maybe they'll follow in their footsteps and start pushing back. Let me go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. No money for education, but definitely money for Ukraine. That's right. Tammy said, I used to teach at the college level. I worked 4 jobs to try to make ends meet. I ended up leaving education altogether and became a contracts manager. I left higher ed too. I left higher ed in January of this year. SG, I have 2 masters. All the job I got was a substitute teacher, which is better than adjunct. Yeah, adjunct professors, you guys, like they don't even get benefits. Again, it's another way for the university to have cheap labor. Deneen says, it's just like K through 12. The administration and principals make the money. Teachers are moonlighting at the Cheesecake Factory. That's right. Thank you for the chat, super chat, Danny. Sabby, do you buy the reason that some presidents use to justify their high salaries, namely that they bring a lot of donor money to the university? There could be some truth to that, but there's a whole department that brings in donor money, where their job is just to travel and get donors to donate to the university and to get people who are already donors to be recurring donors. There's a whole field for that. Alumni relations participates in some of that as well. But that's a good question. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. University got fat endowment funds or Wall Street manage. Thank you for that. And thank you for the super chat, Steve. Breaking news, a tentative agreement has just been reached just now. Oh, I'll have to check it out, Steve. With the universities, I'm assuming. Thank you for the super chat, Coca-Cola. Shouldn't be this hard to get educated in the US. No, it should not be. And Crip Hop Nation says 70% of my TA income goes back to UCLA for rent, plus some of my TA classes are in inaccessible buildings. Isn't it crazy? It's crazy. It's crazy. I'll take those comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. There is only one thing absolute about absolute power, Sabby. It is that it corrupts absolutely. I never believed some rich, spoiled kid being in charge of speech would ever protect it. Does anyone believe that if any of his workers at his Tesla plants were to complain on Twitter about how terrible a boss he is, terrible working conditions, and use Twitter to unionize, he'd let that fly? ? No, he probably wouldn't. And thank you for this tip as well. Power should always be decentralized. If for some reason it needs to be centralized, then put an expiration date on it. They should start a CBI, Citizens Ballot Initiative, to amend California Constitution, where 80% of all incoming revenue for public colleges and universities in California must go towards students' education, remaining 20% going to pay everyone, will be applied in a way where the income inequality gap can be no more than 10-1. Thank you so much for that, Roger. And I think Eric just got me that update. So here we go. I told you, it's live. Anything could happen. After a 5-week strike, UC and graduate student workers reach a tentative agreement. All right, let's shout it out. Let's shout it out. No, go away. They always want me to subscribe to things. I don't remember all these passwords, man. All right, in a major breakthrough in the 5-week strike that shut down classes and unleashed grading turmoil, the University of California and the union leadership representing 36,000 graduate student workers reached a tentative labor agreement Friday that would boost their pay and improve benefits. Let's see what they got. That's what I want to look at. The tentative agreement would give graduate student teaching assistants, tutors, researchers, and other members of 2 United Auto Workers bargaining union an increase in minimum pay to about $34,000 from the current $24,000. First of all, how the hell can anyone live off of $24,000 in California? Anyway, the unions had demanded doubling their pay to $54,000, but union leadership agreed to take. You guys see this? Are we back with the railroad workers again? The unions had demanded doubling their pay to $54,000, but union leadership agreed to take the offer to their members for ratification. $54,000. How did we go from $54,000 to $34,000? What the fuck? No. Union leadership. What are we going to do about these guys, you guys? What are we going to do about union leadership? This is absolutely ridiculous. Raziel the Great said anything under 50K is pissing in your face, not a slap, but literally urinating. Jesus, that's a big difference. $54,000 and $34,000. Lewis says lawyers. Yes, like this is ridiculous. It was unclear when the ratification vote would take place and whether workers would continue to strike unless the agreement were approved. Look, if you're watching this and you are part of the University of California system, don't you take this shit. Don't accept that $34,000. Listen, once you accept it, you can't go back now. Don't you accept that $34,000. If you ask for 54, they need to give you 54. F that, man. Wow. Wow. What's that, Colin? I thought I saw Colin. Union leadership sucks all the way the fuck around. Yes, this is ridiculous. It's a $20,000 difference. The agreement also offers enhanced support for childcare and health care for dependents. What is the support? What is it? When you say enhanced support, how is it enhanced? What are you offering to them? Are they getting free daycare? I don't like this vague language. And healthcare for dependents. UC also agreed. See, this is another reason why we need healthcare for universal health. You see what I'm saying? The dependents weren't even getting healthcare. UC also agreed to cover supplemental tuition for up to 3 years for eligible international students. Nah, man. Reject that, man. Reject that. I hope they don't accept that. I wouldn't do it. Crip Hop Nation said they stabbed us in the back. What are we going to do about union leadership, you guys? This cannot continue to happen. You know what I told you? Sometimes some of those union leaders, they're in cahoots with management. This is ridiculous. This is why we need worker co-ops. God dang. Wow. All right. I'm moving on to my next story. Now, Joe Biden is facing some pressure here, but it's not from other politicians. It's from people like you and people like me and younger people, Gen Z, that have had enough with these damn prices. They have had enough with the cost of living in the United States. Now, this comes out from Common Dreams. We're going to start off with the article, and then I have a clip that I want to show you as well. You guys should follow Common Dreams. They actually have pretty good articles here. So they have signs that say, "Don't push us out. Stop predatory equity." After the latest Fed rate hike, housing justice activists demand Biden act to fight soaring rents. So we talked before about the Federal Reserve was increasing interest rates. So it's affecting everybody. Tenants need immediate action from the White House to regulate rent and provide more certainty for millions of people struggling to make ends meet. And, you know, this goes back to rent control as well. I mean, my parents' generation in Boston had rent control. My parents' generation in New York City had rent control. By the time I was of adult renting age, they didn't have that anymore. And that's a big part of the problem. There's no rent stability either. The landlords can increase the rent as much as they want. Now, this comes from Brett Wilkins. The Federal Reserve aggressive interest rate hikes ignore corporate landlords' role in creating and maintaining this crisis. This is important. President Joe Biden has the authority to take executive action and direct agency level action to regulate rent. People's Action noted this in a new report entitled, "The Rent is Still Too Damn High." Do you guys remember the rent is too high guy? For example, the publication explains the president can direct the Federal Housing Finance Agency to impose rent controls on borrowers of federally backed mortgages, which would apply to approximately 43.8 million rental units, immediately slowing down rental inflation. Federal agencies also have a role to play. For example, the Department of Housing and Urban Development can work with municipalities, localities, and nonprofit housing providers to incentivize authorities to increase the housing supply, create more mixed income units, and develop social housing that is kept permanently affordable by its dedicated preservation and capped cost outside of the private market. Key here, you have to keep it outside of the private market. Although overall inflation slowed to 7.1% in November, the lowest level since last December, rents are nearly 8% higher now than they were a year ago, according to Consumer Price Index data. That's the biggest single year increase in 40 years. While private rental data on leases may show prices have fallen in recent months, rents are still well above pre-pandemic levels. This is what I was trying to explain to people. Not only that, but there were some landlords there. They were in certain cities that said that they would not increase the rent, and they were still increasing the rent during the pandemic. That happened in Somerville, Massachusetts, by the way. Big problems. The national median rent for a one-bedroom is now 21.4% higher than it was just prior to the pandemic in February 2020, meaning that the median renter is paying $204 more per month. People's Action also took aim at the U.S. Federal Reserve, which on Wednesday raised interest rates for the 7th time this year. A move to slow the economy, the experts say, disproportionately harms borrowers, retirees, and low-wage workers and could lead to a recession. And here's Jake Johnson again. I just talked about him on RBN. Rent inflation is a key driver of core inflation. The Federal Reserve's aggressive interest rate hikes ignore corporate landlords' role in creating and maintaining this crisis and will hurt tenants. People's Actions Home Guarantee campaign director Tara said in a statement that millions of Americans still cannot afford their largest bill every month, the rent. Tenants need immediate action from the White House to regulate rent and provide more certainty for millions of people struggling to make ends meet. Okay. That is the challenge that is being put in front of Joe Biden. There is no control over these landlords. There seems to be no one that can stop them from increasing the rent. Like I told you, we had that rule here in Somerville, Massachusetts. We had that rule where they were not allowed to increase the rent. Landlords were still increasing the rent. So there's no accountability here. There's no rules that are really followed. The landlords do what they want. You know, some of these landlords, we call them slumlords because that's just what they are. And there's no rent stabilization, which means if they increase the rent, they can increase it as much as they want. We don't have rent stabilization here. It's a problem. And I'm sorry when people like Marty Walsh, who at the time was my mayor, when he comes forward and he says, we can't go back to rent control in Boston. Why the hell not? It's not just a problem in Boston, as you saw in that article by Common Dreams. And the question that you need to start asking yourself is this: can Americans keep up with rising rents? I don't think so at the pace that things are going. Here's a video clip here. I want you to see this. Can Americans keep up with rising rent? I don't think that they can if we continue on this trend. Listen to this.
I have kids and we don't know what happens. Is a victim from here and no find a new home for my kids and for us. This is very, very traumatic. When I came to New York 15 years ago, I live 1 block away, so I like this neighbor. It's the quiet and the nice neighbor. When we moved here, my wife and my kids, they are young.
So keep in mind, he said 15 years ago when he first moved to New York. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. We're going to fast forward past that too. Because this is where we get into the gentrification issue as well. So here's someone who's a tour guide in New York. So when the pandemic came, the city's closed, completely closed.
So when the pandemic come, the city's closed, completely closed. No travel people and no tourists, and lost completely my income.
Geraldo and his wife were $12,100 behind on rent at the height of the COVID pandemic. I want to show you something really quick, guys. Look at this. So this is him sitting in front of his apartment. Look at the living conditions that people have in America. And I know, yes, this is New York City, but it should not matter. In one of the wealthiest countries in the world, why do we have to live like this? Look at the exterior, you guys. Look at the door. You see this? What is happening? And this is not his fault. This is not to shame him. This is what greed and capitalism has done to the United States. Do you see this? Why do people have to live like this in this country? Absolutely ridiculous. All right, here we go.
I feel very, very scared about that because increase the rent almost 100%. And obviously we can pay. If evicted from here, we can move from, sometimes going to the father's family or something, but we don't have any family here.
In the United States of America. See, this should have never happened. They should have never been allowed to increase those rents during the pandemic, but they were doing it. He said the rent increased 100%, you guys. Absolutely ridiculous. Candleboat says poverty is an open air prison. I hear it. I feel you. I feel you. By the way, notice he said he came here 15 years ago, came to the country. Someone who came to the United States probably to have the American dream. And then they get here and they realize this dream is only for certain people. Usually for people that already come from money. Usually.
Right now we share the one-room apartment. So the kids sleep in one room and we are share the living room for sleep. If we look in another apartment and 2 rooms or 3 rooms, it's so expensive.
Here's someone that has a family and they have a one-room apartment. By the way, this is not uncommon in New York City. You're basically living in a shoebox. But again, like I said, no one should have to live like that in this country. And there was a time when I thought that you should. When I lived in New York, I was just like, okay, this is the way it is. Everything's small, so we just live in a little shoebox. I never stopped and questioned, but why is that? And why do people just accept it? Well, there's a lot of people that live in the city, so you just have to have a small apartment. Bullshit. Bullshit. When I see people who are millionaires have a whole penthouse for themselves. It's ridiculous. And you have to stop at some point and you have to ask yourself that question. Why do most people just accept it and just say, well, this is just the way it is? Terrible. Terrible. In a city that has over 300,000 millionaires and people have to live this way. Increased by 41%. Crazy.
I don't know if I take another apartment for maybe 2,500 now, maybe I don't know how much is the next year or the next month or the next, I don't know. So this is why I'm about to worry to move a new apartment.
Then you have to come up with 3 months rent all over again and start the process from the beginning. It's a damn shame.
The other worry is about to the evicted. So because the landlord waiting for the rent. I am a member of the Make the Road New York, so they help me to fill the form of the program.
I'm glad this worked out for him. We had that same program here in Massachusetts. At that time, 80% of the applications were denied. People that were applying for rental assistance. 80% of the applications were denied. I'm like, did you guys even look at the applications? Or are you just like, Crazy, man.
We need the protection for the community, for the landlords or the commercial prices not increase like, I don't know, 150%.
His landlord recently agreed to raise the rent by only $200, which is still an 18% increase. The fuck, man? So it's like the landlords say that they got to raise the rent because the property rent goes up and they have to pay, the company, whatever company owns the property, they have to pay them more. This is where we need to start following the dots. Who are the companies that own the properties? Because BlackRock and Vanguard's been buying up a lot of shit. And once you follow those dots, then you see who really holds all the cards. Then you'll understand why we are having to live the way that we live. It is disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. So match this to that Common Dreams article. This is why they are demanding that the president step in. This is why. Crazy stuff. Let me go to some of the comments here. Thanks for the super chat, Colin. Doesn't Chelsea Clinton own a condo in NYC that takes up a city block? I believe so. I think I read that somewhere as well. So much wealth concentrated at the top. And then you have people like Corrado. Him and his family live in a one-room apartment. Jonathan says, I'm a teacher and I had to take a high interest loan in order to avoid eviction. It's hurting even those in the professional class. That's right. Adam says, because they keep you working so fast and long, you don't got time to question it. That's another thing too, why people don't stop and think about it. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Let me see. Sab, they're asking for $54K when fair market rent for a 28-bedroom apartment in California is $2,028. In order to afford this level of rent and utilities without paying more than 30% of income on housing, a household must earn $6,761 monthly or $81,133 annually. Assuming a 40-hour weekly, 52-week year, which translate into an hourly housing wage of $39.09 an hour, $44 to $62 for more expensive areas. Left are terrible negotiators. A lot of people don't know about that, Roger. Like you and I know about that because you told me about that cost of living report. Thank Obama for not bailing out MLK Jr. Boulevard and Main Street as president, but voted as senator to give billions in government money to Wall Street, allowing massive foreclosures, which hit Black hoods the hardest. Thanks, Trump, Bernie, and AOC for doing the same in 2020. Now these guys bought up all the homes, engaging in rent speculation, driving up rental costs, public banks to temper speculation, plus outlaw private equity from owning housing, ballot initiative style. Thank you so much for that, Roger. Okay, something a little bit different. We're moving on to another story here. Well, we got some news here in Boston. Local news, but became a rather large national story. Apparently, my outgoing governor, which is Charlie Baker, yesterday, I found out why he decided not to run for re-election. It seems that he has been chosen for another position, but not the type of position that you would think. So it appears that Charlie Baker is now going to be the president of the NCAA. I kid you not. From governor to president of the NCAA. Let's see how this happened. Let's see how this happened. So there's Governor Charlie Baker there. Let's see why they decided to choose him. There's the NCAA. People are asking that question too, by the way. Maybe it's the fact that he's the nation's most popular governor as a Republican in one of the most liberal states. Let me chime in here for just a second. Yeah, this is actually true. Charlie Baker, did you guys know that? Charlie Baker is the most popular governor in the nation. There's reasons for that I can get into in a bit, but he is the most popular one. And yes, he is Republican. He is a Republican, but he's more like a moderate. I'll get into that in a second. Maybe it's his crisis leadership experience during the pandemic, his background as a private sector CEO, or even his stated focus on solutions not politics. Maybe it was because he too was once a college athlete on the Harvard College men's varsity basketball team, married another one, and now is a father to 2 former Division III college football players. This is something I do remember. Like, everyone in his family is an athlete. Or maybe the reasons the NCAA picked outgoing Governor Charlie Baker to become its next president are, simply put, all of the above. On March 1st, Baker, 66, will succeed current NCAA President Mark Emmert, who is stepping down under a planned departure. In announcing its next chief, the NCAA officials seemingly drew on a variety of the many components of Baker's resume, but especially his political background and reputation as a bipartisan problem solver, as the organization continues to navigate legal challenges around student athlete compensation and other issues. Because you guys know, well, for those of you who are not in the sports, student athletes can get paid now. So just got to tell you that. Okay. Governor Baker has shown a remarkable ability to bridge divides and build bipartisan consensus, taking on complex challenges in innovative and effective ways. That's coming from Linda Livingstone, president of Baylor University in Waco, Texas. As a former student athlete himself, a husband to a former college gymnast, a father to 2 former college football players, Governor Baker is deeply committed to our student athletes and enhancing their collegiate experience. These skills and perspective will be invaluable as we will work with policymakers to build a sustainable model for the future of college athletics. And that skill set appears to be valuable enough for the NCAA to part ways with its past tradition of hiring university presidents and athletic directors. And this is why some people were giving pushback when this story came out yesterday, because some people were like, how in the hell is he qualified to be president of the NCAA? Because traditionally, he is not someone that they would pick, even though, even though he has been a college athlete himself. Traditionally, they would go with someone who was already a university president or an athletic director. So when this came out, and I think it was Colin said something to me like, how the hell did he get that job? I was like, maybe he knew somebody. It's a great day for college athletics. It's a great day for the NCAA. That's coming from Blake James, the athletic director of Boston College. I commend the group that was identifying who our new leader was for finding someone who is outside of the norm or who we are. We're an association of institutions of higher education, so at a time when there are a number of challenges, to bring someone in from the outside who is a proven leader, who understands the political landscape, I think was really just a good move. Baker is stepping into a role that will put him at the center of a number of pressing legal and legislative problems for intercollegiate athletics. So then it goes into college players being able to receive payment. This is a long article. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do want to pop out really quick and say this because I have something else I want to show you as well. A lot of things happened when Charlie Baker was governor. If you don't live here, you're about to find out now. A lot of things happened. So he actually was governor here for 2 terms in a row. And this time he said he was not going to run for re-election. Now we know why. Now we know why. A lot happened. Let's see. Do we have the time? I'm trying to remember if he was still here when the Boston... I think that happened under him. Eric, you'd let me know if I'm wrong. We had the Boston Marathon shooting. There was that. Boston Marathon bombing. There was that and the manhunt for that guy. There was the snowstorm from hell that happened 3 weekends in a row. And he had to shut down all transportation and no one was allowed to be on the road. There was that. Sorry. So there was that as well. What else happened? I'm just trying to think. There's been so many different things. The pandemic was a big one. There was that. The public transportation disaster was another thing that he had to go through. It was a lot of things. But what you have to understand, I may not have agreed with all of his decisions, but for the most part, we came out okay. We were able to breathe. That was before him. Okay, that was before Baker. I forget. That would have been under Deval Patrick then. Sorry, guys. Correction. That was under Deval Patrick. But anyway, a lot of things went down. But he is the most popular governor in the United States. Now, this is coming from Mass Live. Approval rating, Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker is the most popular governor. Again, he's a Republican. I'm not going to read the entire article, but I do want to show you a couple of things here. 74% of registered voters in Massachusetts say they approve of the two-term Republican who is not seeking a third term in office. Only 20% of voters disapprove of Baker. Now, that was from the poll July 1st through September 30th. Vermont Governor Phil Scott, a Republican, had the second highest approval rating of 73%. Sorry, guys, I'm really stuffy. Approval rankings for other New England governors include 59% for New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu and 58% for Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont. But anyway, that's the source for that, where I wanted to tell you that he is the most popular governor in the nation. Part of it was because of the way that he handled the pandemic. Now, I have disagreements about that, but some people feel that he did the right thing. I have disagreements. Now, I told you again, he is not like a typical Republican. Like, he considers himself to be like a moderate Republican, so to speak. For example, he's not against a woman's right to choose. He tends to focus on what is the solution, not so much what's the political ideology, like that kind of thing. I think he has the Republican title because of economic reasons per se, but he's not progressive, so I didn't vote for him. But I'm just saying that, like, a lot of people like him here in a blue state for the most part. We have red pockets, but for the most part, it's a blue state. A lot of people liked him and liked him enough to vote for him again. Now, the incoming governor is a Democrat. That's Maura Healey. She corporate too, just like the rest of them. But there was something I want to show you what Charlie Baker said about American politics. And this points out something that I've said before when it comes to the average American and what people are actually thinking. Listen to this point. This was an interview he had when he announced that he wasn't going to run for re-election.
But what does it really stand for and represent? And I've said for a long time that I do not believe the vast majority of the people who get up and go to work every day, get up and go to school every day, worry about their families and their communities and their kids and their neighbors, spend anywhere near as much time on social media caring about politics as people in politics and people in media think they do. And I view it as a universe. It's a big one. It's loud, it's organized, it's influential, it's noisy, but it's not where most people live. And I think at some point, we as a society need to accept and understand that those folks are going to work really hard to drag as many voices and as many eyeballs onto their platforms as they possibly can. But they aren't where big chunks of the world lives.
That piece right there, I think, is important. This is something I do agree with him on. And this is something I was telling you guys before. Most people are not politically involved. Most people don't vote. Most people are not watching independent media. Most people are not watching the political circus that happens on Twitter, Facebook, etc. Most people are not paying attention to those things. And that is one thing that I think that he really understood and he got right. that, look, most people just they're not tuned into this. So if you come to people and you offer them solutions and not so much focus on, oh, it is a woman's right to choose. Oh my God, should we have transgender bathrooms? Like that kind of thing. For him, the way that he would approach it is, let's just find a solution. Not so much, I'm a Republican and this is what I believe. Does that make sense to you guys? And that's what a lot of politicians do. They'll be like, well, my party feels this way. My party feels that way. And for him, it was just like, let's just figure out the solution. I didn't always agree with the decisions, but I think he was able to reach people in a way that was not seen as a partisan way. Just something to think about. Going to go to the comments, and then we're going to get into our last story. But president of the NCAA, good God. I don't know, man. Juliet said, white man in a suit. Groundbreaking. Juliet. Juliet, why? Why, Juliet? Danny says, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, sometimes you have to take the parties out of it and just be like, look, tell me the problem. Let me tell you the solution. I don't know. I'll take the comment on, I think there's one on Rockfin. I could take that. And then we'll get to Chris and Wolf. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Doesn't this sound like Hunter Biden given a job in transportation because he rides the trains? In this case, he played sports. Oh my gosh. I don't know what to say. Harrison says, Bostonian here. Good take, Sabby. Oh, thank you and welcome. What's up, Boston? Shout out to Delthea for the super chat. The PMC is a F fest of incest where positions change, but the sickness remains the same. R and D are just different sides of the same coin. That's right. That's right. It's funny how he could get that position, huh? All right, let's get into our last story tonight, you guys. And this is Richard Wolff and Chris Hedges have a discussion about inflation. I know I've talked a lot about finance tonight and about the economic state of the country, but we have a little bit more of that. So here we go. So Chris Hedges did interview Richard Wolff about inflation and where the country may be headed. Let's go ahead and get into that.
Inflation at nearly 8%, along with soaring interest rates, massive personal debt, stagnant and in real terms declining wages are crippling the public. As inflation raises prices faster than wages, there is a continued redistribution of income and wealth upward from employees to employers, and more suffering for workers and their families. The Federal Reserve has reacted to inflation by quantitative tightening, reducing the quantity of money in circulation and raising interest rates. The Fed sells securities chiefly to major financial institutions, inducing them to buy by charging attractively low prices for those securities, as the economist Richard Wolff points out. These major financial institutions then pass on the higher rates, plus a markup for their own profits, to their customers, individuals, and businesses. In short, the major financial players profit from Fed policy while offloading its costs onto the smaller economic players they service with loans. The policy is based on the premise that costlier loans will dissuade borrowers who will then demand fewer goods and services and thereby induce sellers to inflate their prices less. The Fed's policy provides cash advantages to major employers, especially in financial enterprises and the rich. Higher interest costs are a heavier burden and a greater risk the smaller the size of a business or of an individual's wealth.
That goes back to the renting story we were talking about earlier tonight in reference to people having to pay higher rent and rent increasing, right? So what the Fed is doing, first of all, it's a stupid strategy, but what the Fed is doing by increasing the interest rates, the person who has the least amount of income, they're going to be affected by this the most.
Joining me to discuss inflation and the precarious state of our economy is Richard Wolff, professor of economics emeritus, University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and a visiting professor in the graduate program in international affairs of the New School University. He is the host of the weekly program Economic Update and the author of Capitalism Hits the Fan and Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, as well as the founder of Democracy at Work. His latest book is The Sickness in the System: When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. Rick, let's begin with inflation, which is, of course, worse in Europe. I think energy prices, energy costs went up by 80% in the UK in October. How did we get here before we talk about the response?
Now, do you guys see why people in the UK are on strike? You see why the railroad workers and the nurses and the postal mail carriers are also on strike. We talked about that the other night. That's crazy, right? They're hit the worst by it right now.
Yes, well, it's in a way the best question to ask, partly because it's how the inflation gets going that people are mostly interested in. It certainly should be part of understanding how to get a grip on it and to slow it or stop it. And finally, it is ignored as the obvious question by the media, which raises all the mass media, which raises all the questions why that might be the case. So let me answer. An inflation is a very simple idea. It's a word that refers to a general increase in prices. Not every price goes up. Prices of one thing go up more than another thing. But if in general the movement of prices is upward, and if it's more than the barely noticeable 1% or 1.5%, well, then we call it an inflation. And the current rate here in the United States, depending on how you count, 7.5 to 8 to 8.5%. And as you point out, higher in many parts of Europe, although it should be pointed out that both China and Japan have much, much lower rates of inflation, basically no inflation at all. So it is not, as the Biden folks like to say, a universal problem. It isn't.
Did you guys hear that piece right there? When I first watched this interview, I was like, okay, I have to play this for everybody. It is not a global problem. Japan and China are not having this issue. You guys see this? You hear it? Pass that on to your friends. Let them know about that. Anybody want to move to Japan? Who's coming with me?
Next point. Why doesn't inflation happen? Well, the answer here is so simple, you really have to wonder why it isn't spoken. Prices go up if the people who have the power to set prices raise them. That's it. No magic, no difficulty tracking through who does it. Employers do that. It's part of what it means to be an employer. The job description of the employer includes raising, lowering, or keeping the same what the price is. And what the employee's job description excludes is exactly the same thing. In other words, a tiny minority of the American people, the less than 1% who are employers, raise the prices. Otherwise, we don't have an inflation. So the first level of critical looking would have to be at the employer class, because they, not government officials, not the employees that are the vast majority, let alone those people at home and who are not working, it's the employers who made a decision, one after the other, to raise prices. They're the ones who give us, who impose on us an inflation.
And they did so because they could. They did so because there's no one stopping them from doing it.
Now the third and final point, also missed by the mass media. It is, of course, reasonable to ask, why did the employers choose to raise prices about 18 months ago, and to do so further and faster and for a longer time than had been anticipated by the Federal Reserve, who, we should remember, formed and founded 100 years or so ago, had as its number one objective what is called maintaining price stability. Clearly, they failed because an inflation means that's what we do not have. Okay, so what do the employers tell us?
This goes right back to the rent stability issue I was complaining about too. Like I told you, like once upon a time, this did exist here. Once upon a time, rent control did exist here. But someone along the way, and I'm going to have to look into this, someone along the way decided, we don't need to do that anymore here. We don't need to have that anymore in Boston. I want to know who made that decision. I'm going to have to look into that because someone decided that. And you see how things just went crazy now. Now you have apartments that are like $4,000 a month. You see what happens when you don't have those types of regulations in place? People just go crazy.
Well, they could tell us what they learned in business school. Namely, every major decision you make should be guided by its impact on the bottom line, to wit, profits. Whether you hire someone, whether you expand your business, whether you borrow money, whether you issue shares of stock, whatever you do should be guided by whether it will enhance your profitability, in which case you should do it, or it will depress the profitability, in which case you should probably not do it unless there are extenuating circumstances. So the honest answer of an employer as to why he or she raises prices would have to be to make more profits. The problem is that when employers raise prices, it's a tiny minority financially hurting the majority. We all have to pay the higher prices that they determine to impose on us. That makes the employer prima facie an unhappy object of our, shall I say, irritation. So employers, which should surprise no one, have come up with a wonderful portfolio of scapegoats, things to say when you're trapped in the glare of publicity about raising prices to exculpate yourself. So one employer will start telling you fantastic stories about quote unquote supply chain disruptions, a ship that got stuck somewhere, or maybe how the Chinese are coping with COVID-19, or maybe the one I like best, I have to do it because other employers like me are doing it and I buy things from them. And so I have to pay them more. So one employer uses the behavior of the other employer to justify the total impact of all employers on the rest of us. We shouldn't believe what the employers say, given the obvious self-serving interest they have in removing themselves from the glare of publicity. Sadly, the media in our country, present company accepted, of course, but the media in our country overwhelmingly service the employer class by giving enormous attention to all the excuses they provide, minimal investigative scrutiny, and almost never pointing out to the American people that what you're grumbling about at the supermarket or the department store is the decision made by a tiny, unaccountable minority looking to make more profit.
Well said. Well said. That is actually what is happening here. And I think a big part too that he mentioned what mainstream media is ignoring. Mainstream media is not explaining it that way. They're mentioning all the excuses that he said. And it's sad because like most people watch mainstream media, not independent media. So most people are going to hear the narrative that's coming from MSM and they're going to believe that narrative, not realizing all the ins and outs. It's really just a simple response. Like the fact that they're doing so because they can, and there's nobody holding them accountable. There's nobody that's like basically slapping their hand and telling them, no, you can't do that. This is where you would think the president would step in, right? This is where you would think Joe Biden would step in and say, okay, that's it. You guys can't do this anymore. He said he would ask them. And I'm like, at this point, ask? What do you mean ask them? No, you tell them. You don't ask them, you tell them. Ay, ay, ay. Eric, if you still have that pyramid chart, I know you're probably like, I know she's not asking for this again. If you still have that pyramid chart, can you let me know? Because I want to show people, we have new people, and I want to show people where the president actually sits on that hierarchy chart.
Although the employers will argue with some justification that energy prices have risen and there have been disruptions to the supply chain, although not as extensive as they claim.
Yes, absolutely. There has to be always a grain of truth. Otherwise, the exaggeration you're making will be taken as a simple lie. So yes, try to anchor it to something. It would be more believable if we were in Europe, because for the Europeans, they are paying a very heavy price financially for the war in Ukraine. We are not. I mean, very important. We are leading the charge to impose the sanctions on Russia after Russia invaded Ukraine. We, the U.S., imposed with our allies in Europe, allies who are increasingly withdrawing from this arrangement, but nonetheless, they have gone along with it to impose sanctions on the exports of oil and gas from Russia. What they didn't seem to understand was that the Russians might very well be able to cope with these, which they have, and to come up with some counter sanctions of their own, which they...
Or they may have already had a plan or predicted that this was going to happen and they had already prepared for it. They really underestimated them. Or did they? I feel like they either really underestimated Russia, or maybe they didn't, but they just assumed that they would eventually cave and do the right thing. I don't know, but they really weren't prepared for this.
Also have. And the counter sanctions, together with the sanctions, have driven up the price of oil and gas, above all for Western Europe, which had come to rely on the gas from there, particularly the powerhouse economy at the core of Europe, which is Germany. So yes, you're right. Energy prices there have doubled, tripled. More horrible news of that kind is coming next month in December, when all kinds of further steps are going to go into effect. And so, yeah, in Europe for sure, their inflation is affected by corporations raising prices, but with the added boost, the added promotion, if you like, of the rising energy costs, and which are making, frankly, the Europeans, particularly the French, but also others, increasingly disaffected by the whole Ukraine situation. And that is going to become a major headache and headline in 2023.
Well,
yes, that's the other piece too. It's so interesting because I mentioned that on RBN earlier too, was the oil, the energy crisis, and the fact that they don't know if they're going to have heat this winter, at least in the UK, according to what my friend told me. But this is just, it's absolutely crazy, you know. Maybe that's why they have thousands and thousands of people out in the streets. It's easier to get them to come out because they're like, this is ridiculous.
Well, the industrial sector in countries like Germany are suffering tremendously from this.
Tremendously. And if you put them together, and for me, this is the biggest story that is emerging. If you put together the discriminatory impact on Europe of the sanctions program and its impact on energy on the one hand, and the Biden administration following the Trump administration to, quote, bring jobs here to the United States, what many Americans don't seem to understand is that you may talk a lot about China, but the companies bringing production to the United States, because we subsidize them now on a scale we never did before, the latest microchip industry subsidies, even more so. You bring production here, it's coming increasingly from Germany, from France, from Italy, from Europe. You are, and this is a language they're speaking in Europe now, you are deindustrializing Europe. They are horrified. They are angry. In Paris, there's a school, been there for 25 years, but is becoming very important now. It's called the École de Guerre Économique. In English, the School for Economic Warfare. And
let me tell you something. If Germany is hurting, Germany at one point had a pretty good, pretty strong economy. If Germany is hurting right now, because that was like, that's like my second home here. If Germany is hurting, they're really in trouble. They're really in trouble if they're hurting.
Their argument is the British Empire can no longer be the American agent in Europe. That role is now trying to be taken by Germany, leaving everybody else out. And the fracturing inside of Europe, it's held below the surface of publicity. But if you pay attention, it's everywhere and getting stronger literally by the day.
Well, and will be exacerbated, of course, over the winter. All sorts of restrictions on power usage, even showers, this kind of stuff.
The World Health Organization has given out, I believe it was today or yesterday, has given out a horrible picture of what Ukrainians are going to suffer because the electricity system has been a victim of the war to this point, and they rely on electricity for a lot of what their heating system is. It gets quite cold there, et cetera, et cetera. You're talking about a proliferation of really urgent crisis situations.
So let's talk about the Fed and the response of the Fed, which, in short, has inflicted even more pain on the American public.
Yep.
I am struck there, and here I just put on my hat as an economist. I'm struck by two things. Number one, the inflation has been going together with nice improvements in profitability across many, many sectors, not all, but many sectors of the United States. It gives a lot of evidentiary support to the notion that the inflation was done because it was the best profit-enhancing move after the pandemic had kind of eased off a little bit with us, etc. Number one. But I'm struck by the fact that no one is talking about what used to be a big topic, namely something we call stagflation. And let me remind everyone what that is. That's when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, ostensibly to slow or stop an inflation, but fails to do so. So that we end up with rising interest rates, cutting down people's ability to spend because they can't afford to borrow at those rates, but that the prices don't come down. So we have a mixture of inflation and stagnation in the sense of productivity and employment. And we even have a term because that has happened so often, stagflation, a new word in our lexicon. Well, you would think for people who have had some experience, which the Fed people by virtue of their age alone have had.
I can get down with that, D. Henry Miller. Let's all stop paying utility bills. That might be a plan. Seriously. I could get down with that.
That they would talk about that and give us some reason, any reason, to believe that we aren't at risk of having stagflation, namely higher interest rates with no amelioration of the inflation problem. There are plenty of specialists looking at this who believe precisely that's where we're headed. So it's not as though I'm the only one who remembers this term that we all learned in economics graduate school. But here's an even bigger issue. Raising interest rates never was and is not now the only way that the Federal Reserve or the U.S. government has reacted to inflationary situations. In 1971, a conservative President Nixon imposed a wage price freeze to stop an inflation. It worked beautifully.
That's something, this is what I've said before, because I think we mentioned this one time before on the show about what Nixon did to freeze the prices. This is something that Joe Biden should be trying to do now. Like, it's just like, like, I'm not pro Nixon, but that makes sense that he did that. I mean, otherwise, like, these companies are not going to stop raising the prices if you don't put your foot down. If you continue to let them keep doing it, they're going to keep doing it. They're getting richer and richer, and the rest of us are just, pinching by, basically. Pinching by. Try with me if you want to. I know what it's like to make really low wages. I can stretch out a sandwich for a week. I'm serious. If it gets to the point where I'm not buying anything, I'm not buying anything if I can help it. I'm stocked up on most things anyway that I need on a monthly basis. But I'm just telling you, I just put the pedal to the gas, man. Not buying anything. I can get in my car and drive off. Seriously.
So well that its initial duration, 3 months, was extended because it had done the job without raising interest rates by this alternative. I am not saying that the alternative has no problems. It's not a panacea. But to exclude it from conversation, to exclude it from the agenda so that the Federal Reserve not only doesn't consider it, but doesn't even deign to give us a reason why is remarkable, and it should be alarming. Here's a second example, same point. In the early 1940s, then President, progressive Democrat, at least retrospectively, Franklin Roosevelt, is confronted by his economic advisors, who included one of my professors, John Kenneth Galbraith. He's confronted by them and told, look, you're moving resources to fight a war. Those resources used to be used to make consumer goods and all kinds of appliances, and we're not using them for that anymore. And therefore, we're going to have very quickly, here we go, a sudden shortage of consumer goods. The demand for them isn't going away. The American people want to have a cup of coffee. They want to put sugar in it. They want to have meat with their meals, et cetera, et cetera. And they're not going to have the supply. If we allow the market to deal with this situation, the shortage will give us an inflation. People with money will bid up the price of scarce consumer goods so that the middle income and lower income people will be frozen out of the market. And that, at a time when you're trying to fight a world war, you think puts you in danger, would be crazy. You'd be dividing your people with bitterness and envy when you need the exact opposite, solidarity and unity. And what did Roosevelt do? He took Galbraith and the others' advice seriously. And he said, okay, for the following important scarce consumer items, meat, sugar, flour, gasoline for your car, coffee, and a whole bunch of others, you won't use money anymore. It will not be sold to the highest bidder. The only way a storekeeper can legitimately sell any of those items is if you have a ration card. The government printed ration books. There were little stamps you tore out of the book, and to get a quart of milk, you had to give the storekeeper that stamp. If you only gave them money and they gave you the milk, they would be liable to arrest. That was illegal. They had to use the stamps. And the government, some of you may smile, distributed these books, these ration cards, ration stamps, according to the notion of what did you need. If you had a lot of young children, you got stamps for milk. If you were an elderly couple, you didn't get stamps for milk. If you were rural, you got more stamps for gasoline, to motorize, to move your truck. If you were urban and had mass transit, you wouldn't get them, etc. Logical things.
Okay, so how do we get these stamps back again? How do we get these stamps? I mean, it sounds like common sense to me. I don't hear anybody talking about, I don't hear Joe Biden talking about this. I don't hear his administration talking about this. This is why it's important that we know history. I didn't even remember learning about this in school. This is the first time I heard about these ration books when I saw this interview.
Rationing is an alternative. Wage price freezes are an alternative. That we as a nation have a Federal Reserve charged with dealing with price instability. That's their fault, since they're the ones supposed to keep it stable. That they would have a conversation whose real purpose is to make all of us not question which tool is being used according to who gets hurt and who gets benefited by it, but rather we're only left to debate, should it be 0.75%, 0.5%? My goodness, this is an exercise in censorship of the most damaging kind, because it immediately translates into damage to the standard of living of the American people.
All right. It's a long interview. You can see the rest of it on the Real News Network. And the name of this video is called Inflation, Europe's Energy Crisis, and the Fed with Richard Wolff for the Chris Hedges report. So check that out. If you want to see the rest of it, I highly recommend watching the full interview. But we have to talk about these things. Let me know whenever you have that chart, Eric. We have to talk about these things because I really like listening about economics because, and I don't think we should listen to it only when we have inflation, right? Like I think we should be listening to this information on a regular basis so that we understand how the market and how things truly work. And so that way, when we hear those talking points from mainstream media, we can push back on that. You know, we have to educate ourselves. This is really important. Delthea said, my folks had some old ration books in the trunk at the foot of their bed. Wow. Yeah, this is the first time. But that's why I was like, I had never heard about that until I saw that interview. But as I was saying earlier, in reference to where the president actually sits, some of you may have seen this before. I've had it on the show multiple times, but I know there's some newbies in the chat as well. And you need to understand the difference between feudalism then and feudalism now. It's still the same, but the titles have changed. If we want to go back and we want to look at medieval feudalism, you would see at the top, you have the monarchs. Next, you would have landed gentry. Third, you would have the clergy. Fourth, the royal ministers. Fifth, the merchants. Sixth, vassals. And at the bottom is everyone else. Peasants, laborers, conscripts, etc. Fast forward. Today, corporate feudalism. At the top, you have the central bankers. This is the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Japan, ECB, etc. You have the big bankers, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Lloyds, etc. Next, you have the corporate elite, the Fortune 500 multinationals. Right here, fourth, is where you have elected officials. That's the president, the MPs, the representatives. So if you pay close attention, this is what I've been trying to explain to people before. The president is not at the top. The president serves the oligarchs above him. Even the people who are Fortune 500, the corporate elite, they are still above the president of the United States. So as the president of the United States, it is pretty much their duty to protect these people, the bankers and the corporate elite. Below the elected officials, you have top bureaucrats. Now that includes commissioners, secretaries, judges. Then you have top professionals. That's doctors, entertainers, and clergy. And at the bottom, once again, you have everybody else, the workers, the students, the soldiers. These are a lot of the people that you see going on strike today, the people at the bottom. So the point that I want to drive home is this. Some of the people that you think have power or may have some type of power are not utilizing their power because of the people who are above them. And that would be the bankers, the banks, and of course, the corporate elite. And if we really want to get specific here, and we want to talk about someone being above the president, technically, we talked about Elon Musk at the beginning of the show. Elon Musk would be above the president. You guys see the difference? You see what I'm saying? Even someone like Elon Musk would be above the president because of his wealth and because of his status. He's the second richest person in the world. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So when I say that they serve and protect corporate interests, this is exactly what I mean. This is why we don't have Medicare for all. This is why they don't really want to cancel all of the student loan debt. And this is why they refuse, or the DNC will refuse, to let someone like Bernie Sanders actually win a fair shot. This is why they will come in and disrupt whatever campaign that they can so that they keep the status quo. Medieval feudalism, corporate feudalism. It hasn't really changed, just the titles. So there's that. Anna says Sheldon Wolin calls it inverted totalitarianism. This is why. So these individuals right here at the bottom, they stay at the bottom. Most of them will stay at the bottom. Most of them don't make it to top professional. Most of them don't make it to top bureaucrats, and most don't make it to elected officials. Well, at least they're not the ones on the DC level. I'm not talking about local politicians. So these people at the bottom have to fight against all this. Now, that is not to discourage you. That is not to hurt your feelings. That is to show you the reality of the situation. Mainstream media is not going to show you that. Some independent media is not going to tell you this either. Delthea says, if you haven't read Wallen, you need to. Terry says, I love this chart. Thank you so much, Terry. All right, guys. Let me take that comment. I think there's one more comment on Rockfin. If I can take that, Eric, and then I will go ahead and head out. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. See that, Sab? Centralized power in the case of the oligopolies? I don't know how you spell that, Roger. Oligopolies shows us that the only thing absolute about absolute power is that it corrupts absolutely. This started with the Reagan's AG taking a different approach to antitrust that led the SCOTUS to redefine antitrust, making it easier to do mergers. Time we update antitrust and reinforce to break them up and rip ownership away from them to give to the workers. Bingo. Thank you. Oh, I had starred chats. I'm sorry. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. Supply chain has a chain to your wallet. Ka-ching. Ashira says, Sabby Sabs, only a corporate slave ask and not demands. Thank you for the super chat, Marvin. Musk, Gates, Buffett are super rich. Rothschilds, Warburg, Schiff, Rockefellers, Kuhn, Loeb, etc. are monster rich. You never will hear about them. Robert says, my stance, get rid of capitalism. I think we are headed for a situation allowing that. Thank you so much for that, Robert Templeton. And thank you for the super chat, Cyril O'Reilly. Thank you for this important and informative show on economics. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much. All right, guys, we're heading into the weekend, guys. It's Friday. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm going to try to find something cool to watch this. You guys got to tell me, what should I watch on Netflix? Because, you know, I'm striking out. I started a show on Netflix called Firefly Lane. I tried 3 times. I tried to get into it. I couldn't get into it. I don't know why. I usually like shows that have flashbacks, but there's something about this one. I don't know. I just keep turning away from it. I think it might be a little cheesy. Maybe that's part of it. Some of the lines I can kind of predict, and I don't really like that either. But if there's something that you think I should watch, let me know. I'm open to movies too. Sable says Cuphead. Cuphead? Okay. Oh. Edward said watch Narcos. Narcos, Cuphead. Sean says watch Utopia. Ooh. I'm going to have to check that out. Miss Cleo documentary. Oh my God. Is that the Miss Cleo? Is that the Miss Cleo that was the psychic Is it that Miss Cleo, Danielle? If it's that Miss Cleo, I have to watch that. Miss Cleo used to come on. I don't know if everyone in the chat is old enough to remember Miss Cleo, but Miss Cleo had like these infomercials and like she would come on and go, "Hello, my name is Miss Cleo, and I am going to tell you your future, Miss Cleo." And people would call in, they'd be like, "Tell me, what do you see, Miss Cleo?" And Miss Cleo would just be like, "I can see everything." So it come to find out, apparently Miss Cleo obviously was not psychic, but Miss Cleo also, she was stealing people's credit cards. There's a Miss Cleo documentary, question mark. I'm gonna find out. She was using dead people's credit cards, you guys. That's right, LB. That's right. Fake Jamaican accent. That's right. It turns out she wasn't Jamaican. Oh my God. If that's, I'm gonna find that. I'm gonna find that one. Black Unicorn, I want to see Orgasm Inc. documentary. Oh, well. Oh my gosh. You guys get so many recommendations. I am Miss Cleo. If it wasn't for copyright, I'd show you guys a commercial. Thank you for the super sticker, Christine. Her commercials were hilarious. I was like, what? Things were different back then. Wednesday is decent. Oh, that one is on my list. I do need to check that one out. Thanks, John. Christian said Trolls on Netflix. Trolls. Wow. So many options. Cobra Kai. I'm all caught up on Cobra Kai. I don't miss that one. Yeah. I just finished the season finale of The Cleaning Lady. That one's on Hulu if you don't have cable. And that one was really, really good and really intense. Like, I'm telling you. Juliet says Glow. Ooh. What's that, Where Pilgrim? Miss Cleo documentary is on HBO Max. All right, I'm about to check it out. I'll check it out. I've been kind of show deprived since like Breaking Bad ended, because Breaking Bad to this day still is probably one of the best like TV shows in my opinion. So it's hard because I compare a lot of things to that and Better Call Saul. So Better Call Saul ended. They're done with that. And so now I'm just like, it's hard. It's hard to find something really good. Anywho, I need to go. All right, guys. You know how we do this. Have a really, really, really good weekend. I'm gonna end with Elon. Should I end with Elon? I might do that, man. Watch. Thank you for the super chat, Trondon. Watch Scott Noble's films and get your mind blown. Okay. Eric, I think I may go back. I might end with that call. LB, Web of Make Believe, Netflix. Oh, so many options. Maybe some of these things I'm just not seeing like on my Netflix homepage. A lot of times I see it's the same stuff that's on the homepage. I might have to search for some of these things and then I'll be good to go. But you know what? We're gonna be different. I said it's Friday. We're gonna roll out with something funny. I'm sorry. I'm gonna do it again because I'm just that way. Yeah, again, a little bit of humor for you. So we're gonna roll out with Elon. Have a good night. You guys know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.
In the last few hours, with a handful of journalists being banned.
Well, as I'm sure everyone who's been doxxed would agree, showing real-time information about somebody's location is inappropriate, and I think everyone on this call would not like that to be done to them. And there's not going to be any distinction in the future between journalists, so-called journalists, and regular people. Everyone's going to be treated the same. You're not special because you're a journalist. You're a Twitter. You're a citizen. So no special treatment. You dox, you get suspended. End of story. So and ban evasion, or trying to be clever about it, like, oh, I posted a link to the real-time information, is obviously that is obviously simply trying to evade the meaning. That is, there's no different than actually showing real-time information.
So when you're saying posting a link to it, I mean, some of the people like Drew and Ryan Mack from the New York Times who were banned were they were reporting on it in the course of sort of pretty normal journalistic endeavors. You consider that like a tricky attempt at ban evasion?
You show the link to the real-time information, ban evasion, obviously.
Drew, I don't think you were posting the real-time information, right?
I mean, you're suggesting that we're sharing your address, which is not true. And you're suggesting that we're posting. We never. I never posted your address.
You posted a link to the address.
We posted a link. In the course of reporting about Elon Jet, we posted links to Elon Jet, which are now not online and now banned on Twitter. And Twitter also, of course, marks even the Instagram and Mastodon accounts of Elon Jet as harmful. Using, we have to acknowledge, using the same exact link blocking technique that you have criticized as part of the Hunter Biden New York Post story in 2020. So what is different here and there?
No more acceptable for me. It's no more acceptable for me, for you, than it is for me. It's the same thing. So anyway.
So it's unacceptable what you're doing?
No, what you dox, you get suspended, end of story. That's it.
Elon, I have to ask, I mean, I think what everyone's wondering is it's highly unusual for journalists at the Washington Post and the New York Times to have their Twitter accounts suspended. And it just so happens that it's, the boss in charge, so, what's the deal there? Oh, I think Elon has left.
That's unfortunate because, yeah, I mean,